thank you everyone for joining today's In Conversation with Women for Election Australia. It's a series that we've been running for the last couple of months, speaking to female politicians and former female politicians about their journey into politics and their current journey in politics. My name is Katia Henaway. I'm a proud descendant of the Meriam and Mua peoples of the Torres Strait Islands. I am a businesswoman and an entrepreneur, and I'm also a board member of Women for Election Australia. I'd firstly like to acknowledge that I'm on the Bidjigal lands of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of the lands and pay my respects to Indigenous elders past and present, as well as emerging. I'd also like to note that sovereignty has never been ceded as a result of British invasion and illegal colonisation. Therefore, Australia always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So thank you for joining us from across the country. If you'd like to add in the chat which Aboriginal country you're calling in from today, that would be really awesome. We have the great privilege today of hosting Senator Lidia Thorpe, who is a Gunai and Gunditj Mara woman. She's also a mother of three and grandmother living on Wurundjeri country. Today she comes to us from Ngunnawal country in Canberra, as she's currently working in Canberra. Lidia is the first Aboriginal senator for Victoria. She was also the first Aboriginal representative for the Greens and was the first Aboriginal woman in Victorian Parliament in 2017 as a member for Northcote. So quite outstanding achievements for a young person. In recent months, Lidia replaced former Greens Senator Richard Di Natale as the leader of the Greens Party, after winning an astonishing 65% of the party's votes. Lidia is now one of 5 Indigenous parliamentarians in federal government, alongside Federal Indigenous Minister Ken Wyatt for the Coalition, his Labor counterpart, the Honourable Linda Burney, and Labor Senators Pat Dodson and Mallarindi McCarthy. Welcome, Lidia, and congratulations on your outstanding achievements.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you to the Women for Election Australia for inviting me to have a yarn with you all today. I think it's incredibly important that we have more women making decisions in high places. The world would be a better place if that was to happen more often. And it's also, you know, very important to have First Nations voices at the highest level also at the table making decisions. So thank you for the invitation. I hope I can do it justice. I'm in hotel quarantine. So yeah, it's day 3 in hotel quarantine so that I'm able to actually get my feet into that place that makes decisions for us all on the 6th of October. So yeah, I'm locked in my hotel. I had to look at the picture behind me to see what I'm promoting here. It's not mine. I'd have a flag or something, you know, a bit radical up there, but, you know, I mean, as I said, I'm in hotel quarantine. I've got to just do my best.
Awesome. Thank you. So Lidia, as you know, we are on this call with a wide range of women, many of whom are at different stages of their political journey. Can you walk us through your journey from businesswoman to politician?
Yeah, so, you know, I've been, I was born into a very political family. I think, you know, being born black in this country is being born political, because we're always justifying our existence, we're always fighting to get a seat at the table, and we're always fighting against the many, many injustices that Aboriginal people face every day. So we just, you know, we're born that way, unfortunately, but fortunately that we have that fight in us. So, you know, the conversations around the table and the lounge when I was growing up was always about how we're going to improve the lives of Aboriginal people in this country. So that, you know, that was very early on, particularly around Fitzroy, when the Black Panther movement was you know, alive and well, and when our Aboriginal health services were being set up in the late 60s and early 70s, so that we did have a voice. I was part of that those days. Even though I was a kid, I was still helping out where I could in the kitchen with my nan and things like that. So I became a businesswoman when I moved on to my country in Lakes Entrance. You know, I set up a events management business of my own, so just running events because I love organising things and being in control. And then I went into business with my ex-husband, and it was a glass and glazing business, which was a little bit, you know, weird dealing with tradies and things like that. But we sadly lost that, and I lost my house as a result. I had to go bankrupt because of family violence. And I lost everything. I lost my business. I lost my house. But I didn't lose my mental health, and I didn't lose my drive for what I wanted to do in the community. In fact, the one thing I was more concerned about in going bankrupt was not being able to sit on a board in a community organisation. It wasn't really about my house, because it was materialistic, and I still wanted to contribute. Yeah, so that was my beginnings.
And how old were you then when all of that was going on in your life?
That was about almost 10 years ago now. But, you know, I started quite early. I left school at 14 and had my first child at 17. So I've always, you know, wanted to work. I've always wanted to contribute because my matriarchs have been such a driving force in my life with what they've done for community, that, you know, nothing was going to hold me back regardless of what was coming at me next. And that's how I look at life, you know, where it's just another speed hump. As traumatic and as bad as the experience was, it's like, okay, what are the ancestors going to throw at me next? Because that's what I have to learn to overcome and maintain my own mental health and continue the work of my people.
That sounds amazing, and you know, many of us can identify with those stories. So thank you for sharing that. So we know that you worked in local government at one point. So your leadership within the Victorian Parliament, in 2017 you were the only Aboriginal MP. So can you talk about your journey with the Greens Party? I mean, were you a long-term Greens member, or did they approach you about, you know, thinking more seriously about politics? How did that happen for you?
I was having conversations and dinners with Labor, in fact, and you know, I really liked the Emily's List program, so I was invited to dinners, having coffees, and I wasn't really thinking about politics. It was just something that Labor was saying to me more than anybody, and it wasn't until I kind of looked into what, you know, Labor was about and what they stood for, and I didn't feel like their values and policies aligned with mine personally. And it wasn't until a Greens politician attended the Victorian NAIDOC March, which I was the Victorian NAIDOC chair at the time, that I said, who is that woman? I need to know her, and I want to have coffee with her. And so we did that, and that was Alex Patel. And she said, you should think about joining the Greens. And I'm like, a bunch of greenies, I'm not like that either. And I'm not vegan, and I don't fit the green kind of, stereotype. So anyway, I got to meet a lot of incredible people within the Greens, went to the national conference without being a member, just trying to suss them out. And I just met so many good people, and I thought, well, they actually care about all the things that I care about. We may need to decolonise them a bit because, it's a bit white and a bit privileged, but we can work on that. And so I joined the Greens, and honestly, it wasn't even 12 months later that I got pre-selected to run for Northcote. And that was by pure luck, because I said I needed to understand the policies a bit more, and the best way for me to learn is the hard way. So throw me in front of a Greens audience and I'll do my best to answer the questions. And I answered them from blackfellow perspective rather than a Greens perspective. And I won. And when I won, I just said, you've got to be joking. What the hell does this mean? What do I have to do? And and the rest is history.
Awesome. So I guess the success came very quickly. And in some ways you were perhaps not prepared for it. Is that right?
Absolutely. And seeing your face everywhere, I just said, I'm sick of looking at my own face. And even my 12-year-old daughter said, Mum, your face is everywhere. It's so embarrassing. And I said, just try not to look at it, just focus on the real me. It was a steep learning curve. And, obviously that's when I came out with my bankruptcy story. I tried to keep that quite, it was personal, and it was horrible to do that. And to have to talk to the media about the violence from my ex-husband and having to call him and say, hi, your story or our story is about to hit the papers tomorrow. So I just want to let you know, because we still are friends. And it was what the media do. They shop around when you're a candidate, unfortunately, or when you're new into politics, and they'll bring up as much dirt as they possibly can. And, you've got to surround yourself with good people and people who support you, and know that, that was out of my control. And I still have a good relationship. And we turned that story around, from being a horrible story of my struggle to then, it's the first time I'd spoken about my family violence story ever. And I was inundated with other stories from women all around the country. In fact, it gave them permission to talk also. So, it ended up being a positive in the end.
And I guess that's a testament to the power of authentic leadership, isn't it? The importance of owning your story, and is I think also a lot less stressful in the long run, isn't it? To just face it and own it, and find a way to live with it. And sometimes it's better than trying to cover it up, right?
Absolutely. It's part of your healing, and we heal together, and all those women that reached out, we had some deadly arms.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. I read a story somewhere where when you entered Victorian Parliament, your leadership changed the way the acknowledgement of country was respected. Can you share that story with us?
Well, I suppose it comes back to, putting an activist in a place like that. And the Parliament, every new sitting, they have the Lord's Prayer. And, everyone's very quiet, and you can't make a noise, you can't ruffle your papers, you've got to pay attention. They lock the doors, and you've just got to pray or look around or whatever you do, whatever you're into. And then straight after the Lord's Prayer, they do the acknowledgement to country. And that's when everyone sits down and ruffles their papers and starts talking to their colleagues about what they're going to do and all of that. And I just thought, how freaking rude is this? Like, these people, why even do an acknowledgement if you're not even going to respect it? So I kept standing, and I stood by myself, and then my Greens colleagues stood up beside me, and we just stood. Like, I didn't say anything, I just stood. And then the next Parliament fresh sitting, some of the Labor backbenchers started standing. And then the next new sitting, the whole Labor bench started standing. And that made me a bit emotional. I thought, oh, geez, I didn't expect that to happen. And then the next new sitting, the whole Parliament was standing for the acknowledgement to country, the same way as they did for the Lord's Prayer. Wow. So, yeah, that was just a little protester technique that I took in there. There'll be plenty more of those, I reckon.
So I guess that's a story about the power of silent protest, huh? Yeah, you don't always have to be loud and, in your face to affect such, powerful change.
Well, you've got to stand up for what you believe in, and don't be afraid to do that. And sometimes it might feel uncomfortable, but stay true to who you are.
Yeah, fantastic. So we know as Indigenous women that there are many barriers to entry for Indigenous and culturally and linguistically diverse women into politics, as there are many barriers for women in general. But there's additional barriers for women of colour, particularly around overt and covert racism. We saw recently in the press that the Greens have this newly created anti-racism portfolio, which is led by Senator Maireane Faruqi, and you're also involved in that, I believe. Could you tell us a little bit more about that portfolio? And
Yeah, absolutely. So Maireane and I share that portfolio in terms of Maireen's part of that portfolio, I suppose, is about calling out the far-right fascists, which is rising, right? It's rising in this country just as much as it's rising everywhere else, particularly in the USA. We're seeing some of those behaviours right here in our own country. So we need to call that out, and having a dedicated portfolio to do that, I think, is really important at this time, because we see with the anti-lockdown protests that, some of these behaviours are just are un-Australian, as they say. So that's Maireen's part in the portfolio, and my part is obviously racism amongst perpetrated against Aboriginal people in this country, systemic racism, and calling that out. I think two black women doing that together, pretty tough, I think is a really good, sends a really strong signal that we're not going to just stand by and allow these behaviours to continue. We see it in the media, and we see it even amongst some of our own politicians. So we'll be there like the black women policing the racism and calling it when we see it, and exposing it for what it is.
And just like your silent protest around acknowledgement of country, sometimes affecting change and social change can be as simple as just really small unassuming changes, like calling out bad language or bad behaviour. It doesn't always have to, be a big, undertaking, leadership. I really like the way you approach, leadership in lots of different ways. You can be the activist, but you can also be the silent influencer as well, or the gentle influencer. So
also just letting, like, you know, when you talk, sorry, I shouldn't assume, but when I talk to my kids, particularly my 12-year-old who thinks she's 15, you know, the attitude and the sassiness is coming. I just say to her, you know, do you know how that makes me feel when you behave like that or when you speak like that? And I think saying that to some of these politicians that have some of those values is, do you know actually how much that hurts when you say that about my people or whatever? And trying to get people in a way that, you know, you're getting into the emotional intelligence and getting people to think about what you're bloody hell saying and how divisive that is and how hurtful that is for so many people. So they're the conversations I want to have in a respectful way, which is how I've been taught.
Yeah. Fantastic. So last week we saw in the press that the West Indian country of Barbados announced that it was leaving the Commonwealth, and they also tipped Jamaica to follow. So I know that you have a real passion to take the conversation of treaty to Parliament, which is fantastic. But I wondered what the impact of this discussion around, you know, the Commonwealth is beginning to unravel if these countries, colonised countries, start leaving the Commonwealth. How do you think that will affect the treaty process? Because you've been a really big part of leading the discussion around treaty within the Greens Party.
Treaty is, you know, we are the only Commonwealth country in the world that doesn't have a treaty with its first people, and I think that's a real blight on this country, on this nation's identity. You know, and who are we as a country? What do we represent? What's our culture? I think that by having a treaty or going through a treaty process, because the journey is just as important as the destination, having these conversations with everybody, not just Aboriginal people, but all people around the country about, you know, where do you want to go? What do you want this country to look like? And what's important to you to be able to unify this country in a way that it's never been unified before. And we only need to look at the statistics, you know, of incarceration, deaths in custody, removal of children. You know, they're nothing new. They've been going on for far too long. And we want peace. And I believe a treaty can bring peace. But I want the whole country to have the conversation, not just blackfellas. And if the conversation, you know, brings out that we need to become a republic, then that's what it does. It should be up to the people to decide. But we have to decolonise. The colonisers' process to take over this country has been so violent. And so unrepresentative of the people. You know, it's been old white fellas making decisions for us all the time, and look what it's done. Look where it's got us. We're becoming a very uncaring society, and there's so many things that Aboriginal people can teach non-Aboriginal people in this country on, you know, how we look after our old people. We never let our old people go without. That they are like royalty to us. And, you know, you look at the aged care system here in this country, and it's just so sad. So, you know, and the way we look after our country, how we've sustained it for thousands and thousands of generations, we've got something to tell you all. But we need the space to be able to talk about that respectfully with everybody in our own communities. So I think it's time for a treaty. I don't think that we should have a voice to Parliament before a treaty. I think that we need to have truth-telling first and foremost, and then we talk about treaty and what that looks like, and a voice to Parliament or constitutional recognition can be negotiated as part of a treaty.
Yeah, that's true. I know that with the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in South Africa, and also it was taken across to Northern Ireland, and it certainly had widespread effect, positive effects for communities in those countries. So there's no reason why a Truth and Reconciliation process wouldn't be very healing for this country as well. So absolutely agree. That's fantastic. I'm going to swing back to you as a politician preparing for your new role. So you will be sworn into Parliament in October at the next sitting into federal Parliament. So have you already been to Senate school? And if so, can you tell us what that's like, or if you haven't been to Senate school yet, what do you know about it?
I've been given a few handbooks and I've been given a few briefings. I didn't go to Senate school because they usually only run that for a new Parliament, so they've got big numbers to run Senate school. But the Parliament staff, they're so good. They've just been incredible. Even in the Victorian Parliament, the staff are amazing. So, they're there really at your beck and call anytime you need support. Even the smallest questions, they're there. Got the Senate president, we're texting each other, and I'm like, come on, Scott, tell me when I'm being sworn in. He's like, just hang on, Lidia, you're in hotel quarantine, calm down. So, it kind of, there's no party line when, like coming here on Sunday night, I was only one of two politicians on a private jet, picked up in a private car. It was very flash. And it was Josh Frydenberg and he was like, hey, Lidia, how you going? I'm like, yeah, hey, Josh, and it's really nice. And that's what it really is like, regardless of what you see on the TV and in question time. Yep. There is some respect amongst the politicians.
That's really good to know, actually, because, for those of us that are not part of that world, it's easy for us to make a lot of assumptions about how scary it is or how confronting it would be to be in that environment. So it's really good to hear that, that at the end of the day, you're co-workers in many ways. You work as teams and you have a lot of human interaction.
And I had my Black Lives Matter, mask on, so he didn't mind. He didn't even, shut up.
Fabulous. So we've got about 10 to 15 minutes left in this call. We're going to open it up to the women on this call to see if they'd like to pose any questions directly to Lidia.
Georgina is keen to know if Lidia has set a date for her maiden speech.
Thank you for that question. And it's the first speech. They've changed the name. They're getting up, the old white guys don't have all that much control anymore. So it's called the first speech. And it should be the first week of November. Budget week is so busy. I didn't want it to be kind of, in amongst all the busyness of budget week. So I've asked if I could do it the first week of November.
There's an interesting question from Tian. What is Lidia's opinion on the Greens' lack of affirmative action in candidate pre-selection? Do the Greens have a policy to ensure people of colour have equal opportunity and support to run?
I don't think we do have a policy. And what is their stance on affirmative action? Well, it's a grassroots democracy, right? So it's up to the people to vote for whom they want. you know, the person that comes second to me is a QC. I nearly fell over with that the numbers, and I thought, okay, you know, I got there on my own merit, and I worked bloody hard for that. Like those pre-selection forums, they are full on, and you know, they take a lot of time and energy, and you've got to be across the policies, and you get questioned by every member. And I was prepared for that. Like I was in the right mindset. There was drama going on in my own family, and I just said, not dealing with that right now. I'm focused on this. And I won it in my own right. But yes, the Greens do need to do more in that space. I'm not going to deny that. And, you know, I was instrumental in setting up the Black Greens nationally and the Black Greens in Victoria. And they're starting to, you know, get fired up. So I think I'll leave it to them fellas.
That's it. Good answer. Kat, can I just jump in? There's a great chat question earlier on in our conversation for Jalinda, who said, I've been party choice conflicted for years, and that's held me back from stepping forward into representative lead roles. Is independent the only choice for women if LNP and ALP and Greens policy and systems don't fit? When will we have a strong women's equality party like the UK?
You know, if women want to run for the LNP, if they want to run for Labor, I support that. I do. I've had Black women reach out to me saying that they want to run for Labor. What can they do? And I'm like, you know, I've helped them. I've given them advice. And I haven't pushed my agenda. I just think that, look, I will push it right now, because I think Greens policies are pretty good in terms of women's rights. And the more people we have involved at that grassroots level, the more we can change things. But absolutely independent. That it's hard though, running as an independent. Not that I've done that, but you don't have that party machine behind you. You don't have all of that support. So unless you've got some funds behind you, or you can find funds to support you running as an independent, then that's great. But you know, on the Senate ticket, for example, you don't get very high up on the Senate ticket as an independent. So it is much harder, but it's not impossible. And a lot of independents are, you know, they hold a lot of power in the lower house, in the upper house particularly. So I just think whatever suits your agenda and what you want to, you know, push, and know that, you know, parties also do deals together around preferences and things like that. So there's always that support.
There's also an interesting question from Tanya Giacomo. She said, I love the comment about the need to decolonise political parties. Can you please talk about the changes you have seen in the Greens party towards this aim and the priorities to realise it in the future? So a few more examples around how you've worked on decolonising the Greens, and I guess the anti-racism portfolio is a really great example of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a work in progress, and I'm not going to, you know, deny that. But we now, for the first time ever this year, have a Black Greens member on the National Council of the Greens, and that's never happened before. We've got two, just for cultural reasons, really, because it's hard to, you know, get one person dedicated to representing. So we've got a kind of a backup that sits with that person. And we have the Black Greens that go through Greens policies and question Greens policies in terms of, you know, how that fits with First Nations. So, and believe me, these fellas go through those policies with a fine-tooth comb, and they speak up about what needs to be changed. So I think that's a good kind of start to decolonising, but I'm also pushing at my level now about how we can go a step further with how we communicate, what our language is. So it is a work in progress, but this is week 2. So let's see how we go after 12 months.
Yeah. It'll actually be really interesting to talk to you again in 12 months, to reflect on how much has changed, actually. So there's another question here. We know that one of your top priorities is treaty. You're very clear on that. Can you mention the other, say maybe 2 other top priorities?
So I have the justice portfolio and the sports portfolio. I love sport. I'm a netballer and basketballer, and I've just, I've coached and I've ran big sporting events, Aboriginal community sporting events, and the barriers to participation is so hard to even, get a pair of boots to get on the court or get a bus to where you got to go. But also racism is rife in a lot of these sporting codes. And my priority is not just for Aboriginal people in this space. It's for all people. It's for women. It's people with disabilities. The access issues are all the same. Yeah. So I'm really keen on accessibility in sport. And injustice, well, besides wanting, I think we need a human rights bill with the amount of human rights violations that this country gets away with is criminal in itself. People should start getting locked up for those human rights violations. Yeah. But deaths in custody is high on my agenda, and also raising the age of criminal responsibility. We're locking up 10-year-old babies in this country, black and white, and that's just, they're babies, seriously. 10-year-old, they haven't fully developed and they're being locked up in prisons. So that's they're my priorities. I've got 12 months, I think. The next election, ScoMo's doing pretty well at the moment, so he might call an election in the next 12 months.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't have much time.
Yeah, there is a good chance that it'll move forward, yeah? So there was another question. We have just a little shout out from Masapa Banu from the Torres Strait. He's saying, "You're Wonder Woman. Look out, here comes Lidia." So, thanks for that, Mus.
It's my ancestors, brother. It's my ancestor.
And there was a question about racism in sports. So you very perfectly timed your answer to that. So Claudia, that was a question from Claudia. Thanks. So we've only got a few more minutes left on the call. So just before winding up, is there anything else you would like to share about your experience so far, or just about being a woman in politics in Australia? Because a lot of people in our audience and a lot of people that come to the Wathia programs are women who are really interested in understanding how to move into politics, but also we hear a lot of women talk about their apprehension around, how confronting it is from, the males in politics, and, how to deal with, the attacks, the verbal attacks. And so, you're very, very resilient, as a result of your upbringing, as a result of your life experiences. But perhaps for women who may not have that resilience, what would you say to them, or how would you encourage them to keep moving forward?
Don't read the comments.
Good tip.
Don't read the comments. Although I love fighting with trolls sometimes when I'm bored, but yeah, don't read the comments. And I think have strong women surrounding you.
Yeah.
You know, that you can call up and swear your head off and, you know, just go off your head if you need to, and have that person swearing back at you, and just someone that you can trust and have a good yarn with, who that you just offload, so that you're not offloading on your family all the time, or your partner and your children. So just having other women around you, I think, is really important. And, you know, our old people, don't forget about them, because they've got so much wisdom, and they've done it bloody hard as well in their lives. So they've got some good stories of how, you know, they've had resilience through their life, and that's what my grandmothers have instilled in me also. Because it's going to come at you, right? As a woman, it's going to come at you. If you're a woman of colour, well, you're going to get it double hard. So be prepared for that, and just try real hard not to take it personal.
Thank you for that.
Because it's what you're saying. It's not what you look like or anything like that. It's what you're saying. That people are freaking out because you're getting them out of their comfort zone, which is great.
Yeah, that's right. You're pressing buttons they don't want pressed, right?
Yeah.
That's really good advice. Lidia, thank you so much. It's been wonderful having this intimate discussion with you. We really appreciate your time. We know how busy you are. So thank you for your tenacity, your strength, your perseverance, your incredible leadership. You're an outstanding role model for so many women in this country, and we really, really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. All the best over the next 12 months, and we might hit you up in 12 months' time for another reflective chat.
My pleasure. It's been an absolute. It's been good, because I'm in a committee to. There's an inquiry on the Aboriginal flag, which I had to leave to come and do this.
Yeah.
But I said no. I've got to do this. This sounds really important, and I love connecting with sisters from all around the country. So. Don't forget where you come from.
Yes.
And don't hold back from speaking up and asking questions. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And ladies, before you sign off, we just want to mention that we'll send a follow-up email tomorrow. And so just check your email. We'll have some further events from Women for Election Australia. We've got a course running at the moment. We've got other in conversations like this. So look out for that email from us. Thank you, Lidia, and all the very best.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ladies, for joining.
Parliament.
Bye now.
Thank you.
See ya.